Yeniden merhaba. Çevre TV'de, Çevre TV ekranlarında Çevre Günlüğü'nün ikinci bölümüne hoş geldiniz. Ben Orkun Yazgan. Bugün stüdyomuzda çok önemli, çok değerli bir konuğumuz var. Almanya Büyükelçiği'nin İklim Departmanı Başkanı Theresa Eckermann bizimle birlikte. Almanya özellikle çevre politikaları, çevre teknolojileri konusunda lider bir ülke. Almanya'nın, Alman hükümetinin çevre yaklaşımını, iklim değişikliği, küresel ısınma ve tüm konulardaki politikalarını, önceliklerini konuşacağız bugün Theresa Eckermann'la birlikte. Welcome to our studio, to Istanbul.
Thank you very much for having me.
Merhaba. Merhaba, hoş geldiniz. You are the head of climate section, climate department in the embassy. This is a new department. This is a new position,
yes.
I think.
Yes, this is absolutely correct. So, as you know, we have a new government in Germany since last December already, so almost a year now. And I think climate policies have always played a big role also under the previous government.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think they gained even more political momentum. Part of the new government is the Green Party, called Bündnis 90 Die Grünen. So the federal foreign minister is also part of the Green Party. And obviously that did have certain changes also for the Federal Foreign Office and the embassies. We now have a special envoy for international climate action, Ms. Jennifer Morgan. And we have several dedicated climate focus embassies. And so I'm very happy to be part of the climate section in our economic section at the German embassy in Ankara here in Turkey.
So all the issues dealing with climate is coming more and more popular, important in all the summits, all the meetings, all the conferences all over the world. Top of the agenda is climate. So let's start with, if you like, Germany's approach to that problem,
yes.
to that crisis. Let's start with the big picture, maybe.
Yes. So I think, first of all, there is a great awareness amongst the German population when it comes to climate issues. It is, for example, you might have heard about the bad floodings we had in Germany in 2021 in the summer around the Ahr River, which is in the west of Germany. And I think the German public follows these events very closely also abroad. So this summer there were the really terrible floodings in Pakistan that took a horrible toll on human life and I think led to record financial losses. And so the German public is very aware of the issue and the problem of climate change and is, I think, ready to adapt to that. Now, when it comes to the political side, the term you would read everywhere, the term that describes that massive effort towards transitioning to a green economy is called Energiewende in German, which basically translates as energy transition. And that is really a term you find, as I said, everywhere in political discussions. It's a very common terminology in civil society, in newspapers. So it describes this massive effort we are, as a society in Germany, undergoing towards a green transition. And I think it basically consists of four action points, let's call them. So the first one is obviously reducing CO2 emissions. Then we have increasing renewable energy. And also another issue that is very important is finding alternative fuels. So green hydrogen is a really promising technology there, and we might want to talk about that later. And then also, obviously, very important, the fourth action point is energy efficiency, waste management, these things.
Okay, we'll get into details, but the top of the agenda is energy crisis all over the world, especially for Europe. The winter is coming, already came. And energy prices, electrical prices, there are some demonstrations also in Germany, all over the Europe especially. What are your expectations from that winter and maybe some precautions for that crisis?
Well, first of all, let me say that obviously energy prices due to the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine have also risen considerably in Germany. But the point I want to make, which is very important, that what we are seeing is that energy security and energy prices and the climate crisis are actually all interconnected. And what that points to is that we have to diversify energy sources, and that mainly means investing even more in renewable energies and undergoing an even greater push when it comes to increasing renewable energies. And actually, this April, the German government and parliament had endorsed the biggest legislative package ever when it comes to climate policies, when it comes to the green transition. And so you can really see that we're making that push and have even more ambitious targets. We are phasing out Russian fossil fuels. And third point that is obviously important is that the customer, who in the end has to bear high energy prices, has to be protected from that. So we're working closely together in the European Union and have already agreed on certain regulations, such as saving gas, which is very important. Then we are currently discussing in the European Union a price cap on gas. And on a national level in Germany, we have what is called the gas and electricity price break, which will come into effect from January onwards. And there the regulation is that for industry, for SMUs, so small and medium enterprises, and for private end customers, so private citizens, 70 to 80% of the energy consumption in 2021 will be subsidized by the German government.
Okay, this winter will be difficult maybe in Europe in general, but those kind of measures are important, of course. So let's come back to climate policies of Germany, especially in terms of R&D technologies, and what are your prior projects in that term, in climate, in global warming? Because we know and we hear that Germany has lots of policies, lots of technologies in that term.
Yes, I'm very happy to do that. I think what we should first look at are the different sectors that are of relevance, and then we kind of talk about the different technologies that are currently interesting in those sectors. So ordered from most heavy energy, the sector with the heaviest energy usage to least energy usage, we obviously have the energy sector itself, electricity production, where most CO2 gases are also emitted. Then the second sector is the industry. Then we have the transport sector, then buildings, and then agriculture and waste management. When you look at the energy sector itself, which, as I said, is very pollution-heavy sector, that is actually pretty interesting because of what we call sector coupling. So, for example, when you look at the transport sector, we need electricity to drive our electric vehicles. So electricity production has to be boosted by a manifold to be able to perform the green transition. And there, things such as scraping the maximum amount of, let's say, wind or solar power, then obviously storing that in batteries, and then also distributing that across a network. These are three really important areas of R&D. If you look into the industry, they are the levers where we can also reduce CO2 emissions. Are in those production processes where a lot of heat is used, for example, steel. And there, green hydrogen is a really interesting, promising technology where a lot of research is also being conducted. Again, how that can be stored. And there, those power-to-X processes are also really interesting fields of research. For example, from hydrogen, a kind of fuel, alternative fuel for an airplane that doesn't emit CO2 emissions, can be produced. So these power-to-X processes, transforming one energy form to another one, are also really interesting. Then, of course, when we look at the transport sector, electric vehicles, the heart of an electric car is the battery itself and battery storage. I think there's also a lot of room for optimization when it comes to R&D.
What about the innovations in electrical car sector? You know, the German cars are very famous, very popular in all over the world. So we had already a hybrid cars, but now we are passing to 100% electrical cars. So where is the technology now in Germany in that term?
Yes,
for electrical cars?
Actually, it's pretty interesting that the number of electric vehicles are really constantly increasing, also at a really high rate each year. when we look at the electric vehicles that have been newly registered in 2021, 1/4 of them, of the private vehicles, has been an electric vehicle, so completely electric, or a hybrid plug-in. So 1/4 is, I think, really a really good number, and those numbers will increase. Yes, as I said, the heart of the electric vehicle is, the battery of it.
Yeah.
And so the plan is there for Germany to also become a market leader in battery production. In all over Europe, several new what are called gigafactories are planned for battery production, and 7 out of those in Germany. And the German government plans to spend around 20 billion euros on battery production throughout the next years. As I said, to always also establish Germany as an important country, also internationally, as a provider of batteries for cars. And production is just part of the value chain of a battery. So when you look at, for example, recycling a battery, there are business opportunities in that as well. And jobs will be created along the whole value chain of battery production to recycling.
What about the approach of the giant brands to that new technology?
Yes, so there obviously
we can also name the brands, really famous, Volkswagen, Porsche,
exactly.
Mercedes, BMW.
So it's important that the German government is working hand in hand with those companies. That are obviously also very important for the German economy, as you know. And yes, so they have very ambitious targets themselves. So, for example, Volkswagen, by 2030, they will completely stop producing cars that run on fossil fuels. But by 2030, they want to service to the European market 70% of the cars they sell as completely electric vehicles, and 30% as plug-in hybrids. So completely phasing out diesel cars and fossil fuels.
So this is completely new era for automotive industry also. So let's go with another popular Germany's policy or implementation, renewable energy. The solar power, factories, wind power energy factories. It's been a long time that Germany is investing and have some targets in that area. So what about the solar energy history and targets of Germany and the new technology also in that area?
Yes. So also when I talk about the Energiewende and energy transition, I think it's good to portray them based on some concrete numbers.
Yeah, please.
And the numbers I'm going to talk about are actually enshrined in law. So they're part of a German law, they're not mandatory. When it comes to, so there are two types of targets. There are targets when it comes to reducing CO2 reductions, and then when it comes to increasing renewable energies. And when we first look at decreasing CO2 emissions, so in 1990, Germany emitted around 1,240 million tons of GHGs, greenhouse gases. And so when you talk about reductions, we always talk about this 1990 baseline. And last year, Germany has already reduced that number by 38%. And for the year 2030, the aim is to have a further reduction of 65%, again, compared to that 1990 baseline. And in the year 2040, the aim is to have a reduction of 88%. And in 2045, Germany aims to be completely CO2 and GHG neutral. That was reducing CO2 emissions. Now, when we look at the other side of the medal, that obviously is increasing renewable energies. And there, we currently, when we look at that, as I said, very heavy polluting energy sector that currently causes most CO2 emissions, there we currently use 40% of renewable energies. Now, the target for the year 2030 is to have 80% of renewable energy.
Now it's 40 already.
Now it's 40, exactly, in that renewable energy sector. So in the next decade, we have to double the effort.
Great.
Exactly. And they are obviously wind power, solar power play a really important part.
Okay, my last question will be about COP27. Very important summit for all over the world in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. How do you consider the results of that summit are satisfactory or not for the future?
Yes, so I think, first of all, it's very important that...
Could you be a little bit turn like this? Okay, great. Thank you.
So, first of all, of course, I think it is very important that these meetings take place. They generate political momentum. It's important for political decision makers to meet on the subject every year, for civil society to come together on that subject.
Of course.
So I think they are very important. When we look at the results of this year's COP, when it comes to mitigation, I think Germany would have hoped for a bit more. So right now we are on a trajectory to an increase in global warming between 2.4 to 2.7 degrees. And in Paris in 2015, we had agreed on an increase to a maximum of 1.5 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So there we still have to do some work, and we hope that that gap will be closed in the future. Now, when we look at other issues, I think a lot of progress was made. For example, for the German government, it was very important that the issue of solidarity and responsibility with the most vulnerable states that are already heavily impacted by climate change, that these issues are being considered. And we have agreed at the COP to initiate a fund for loss and damages for the most vulnerable countries, so that they can better adapt to and react to climate change impacts they already feel nowadays. So that is really important.
Okay, thank you so much. Dankeschön, Ms. Theresa Eckermann. Maybe some few words for our program, our channel, because it's the first and only television channel, social media, let's say, platform, especially focused on environment and all those kind of issues.
Yes.
And your final words, please.
Of course, no, I think, that is exactly what makes me optimistic about the future, that I see that great willingness and increasing interest in civil society in climate issues and climate action. That is very important, and channels such as yours do promote that. So that makes me very optimistic about the future. Which is also where I would like to end. I think it's good to end on a note of optimism.
Yeah, great.
Yes, I think we've talked about ambitious targets. They're all there. We now, I think we all realize that this has to be a common effort throughout the next decade, and this has to be the decade of climate action.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Evet, Çevre Günlüğü'nde bugün Almanya Büyükelçiliğinin Almanya'nın Türkiye Ankara Büyükelçiliğinde yeni bir departman, aslında İklim Departmanı'nın başkanı Theresa Eckermann'la birlikteydik. Hem Almanya'nın ülkesinin iklim politikalarını öğrendik, yaklaşımını öğrendik ki Almanya özellikle çevre teknolojileri konusunda, araştırma, geliştirme, Ar-Ge projeleri konusunda tabii çok iddialı ve ön planda bir ülke. Tüm detaylarıyla birlikte konuştuk ve son olarak da geleceğe dair olumlu bir bakış açısı olduğunu da duymuş olduk. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Bugünlük de Çevre Günlüğü'nün sonuna geldik. Yeniden görüşmek üzere. Hoşça kalın.